Always so awkward when you actually do it right in the middle of that. But just to recognize Raintree, BCMS, and Weave. We personally work with all three of those partners in my own private practice. If you want to learn more from them or Bob Kowalik, I know a couple people were asking about Bob's contact information. There is a link in the chat. It's grow.breakthroughptmarketing.com/partners. You can click there, has all their contact information, and you can learn more about what they do. Getting to this session, transitioning. Dave, welcome to the call here. Thank you for being here.
How you doing, Chad? Thanks for having me.
Because this is your first time at a breakthrough event, I'm going to take a stab at an introduction and let you fill in whatever you think would be appropriate.
Sure.
You are a husband, a father of 3.
Correct.
7 down to 3 or something like that. 7 down to 2.
7 down to 1.5. Yep.
Okay, 1.5. So it wasn't too far off there. You're a private practice owner. You had a practice, Princeton PT, with your partner, Owen Lennon, that you grew to 6 practices. And then you merged with professional PT, where you've had multiple roles, primarily in expansion, marketing, and M&A. Is that fair enough?
Correct.
Great. So anything that I missed there in the intro that you think everybody should know here?
No, I mean, I'm primarily in New Jersey, but my kind of role with professional is company-wide now across 5 states. We're in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York.
Okay. And just so everybody understands the sizing, because I think you're in a very unique position where very recently you were running 6 clinics, and now in the last 4 years, you're nearing 200, 190 plus clinics.
Yeah, we're about 200 clinics now. My business that I owned was 6 clinics. Prior to that, prior to opening my business, I was actually a minority partner and kind of opened up a couple clinics for Sports Care, which has 60 clinics or so of their own. At the time, they probably had 25 clinics. Then I started my own business, grew it to being 6 in about 2.5 years, and then sold it to professional. And then I've been on board with professional for about the last 4 or 5 years. That was about 4 or 5 years ago. Managed operations mostly in New Jersey, and then kind of grew to more of my development role now, where I oversee M&A, I oversee our opening up of new clinics and de novos, and strategic partnerships with like health systems, starting new ancillary products like home care, things like that.
Great. So for everybody that's listening or viewing right now, Dave has again a super unique perspective. We probably talked for the first time 2 or 3 months ago, and the way that he looks at growth, I think, is very unique. Again, coming from that private practice background that many of us know. And the thing that really struck me, Dave, where you're at when you're talking about the Novo clinics, just so we're on the same page, for anybody that's new to that term, that essentially means opening a new clinic, right?
Absolutely. Opening up from organic level of identifying a location, not acquiring a location, not acquiring an existing business, but opening up a new location with essentially 0 patients in the door at minute 1.
Yeah. So I'm in Harrisburg and I open a new clinic in Hershey. That's a de novo clinic.
Exactly.
Great. So now when you're doing that, and obviously there are various reasons that an owner might want to do that, to be able to leave a bigger impact, touch more lives, expand their capacity to serve in an area, drive the value of their business within the marketplace. Can you talk about, you mentioned assessing an area.
Sure.
How do you think about assessing an area in terms of growth? And just so you're aware, Chris Redding answered a very similar question earlier, and and just so you're aware of his answer, it was primarily, if you have the right people in place first, then the secondary is go through the other variables of finding the right location. So I would love it if you could focus on that let's assume the right people are in place.
Gotcha. Yep.
How do you look for the right area to open up in?
Yeah, and I would also say, according to what Chris is saying, I agree to an extent, but then there's also variables that might bring your referral sources or where you're driving referrals from to being even more valuable than sometimes the person, because you might have that first and then try to identify the person.
Mhm.
So in our size or our system, we kind of look at opening up a de novo clinic versus acquiring a business in two different ways. So if we're looking to get into a new market, let's say, and when I say market, like a sub market, meaning like a 15, 20-mile radius in the suburbs, we're going to probably try to enter through acquisition. If we want to open a de novo, we're probably going to go in our, let's say, strategic area that we already exist and we already draw referrals from, we already have relationships from. It's not too far away in the zip codes that we currently have. And then I would say in my practice of being a private practice owner, and my kind of put my private practice owner hat on, I would say the things that kind of drive when an opportunity might arise of the type of location or when to open up a de novo, I think a lot of us kind of recognize that opportunity of like, maybe a doc tells you, hey, I have trouble referring into this town or this zip code. Can you open up a location there? Or I have some relationships in the community, or somebody I know has relationships in this particular town where I could kind of drive business from that town through the community and the local kind of aspect of building business that way. And then always, like Chris was saying, if you have a good somebody to partner with, that's probably a good idea too.
Yep. And I completely agree. The de novo clinic that we're opening next, that we're in the middle of construction on, we happened to do an event there, and we found the patients were amazing. Like there was an awesome response to an event that we hosted there. It was actually at a public library. It was unreal.
Right.
So we need to open there. So pretty smart there. In terms of expanding new clinic, you have an expectation on, okay, we're going to take, let's use an arbitrary number, $150,000 to open up a new space.
Okay.
And it might vary depending on, if the geographical location and the cost expense to open up that clinic. But there is a certain number that as an owner, if I'm opening a new clinic, that I need to invest in doing that. Can you give me an idea? And this is, when you and I talked about this floored me how you think about this, because I just had never heard anybody talking about it before. When you're opening a new clinic, the expectation that you have on that clinic's return.
Sure. So I don't remember what I actually said at that time, but I'll go with what I normally do.
Well, you have a goal for 3 PTs, right?
Right. Yeah.
Within a
So,
certain
okay,
time
gotcha.
frame. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we look at a de novo, I really want that de novo to kind of grow into a 3-person clinic where 3 full-time equivalents of a physical therapist can kind of, in other words, that's the goal. That's the potential, what I'm looking for at least to get there. And that might mean approximately 150 to 180 visits in a week. In order to get to the 150 to 180 visits a week, I want to bring in about 12 to 15 new patients a week. So what I do is try to analyze where those referrals, where those new patients are going to come from, and then project them out over the course of, let's say, 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, so that I can say by year 3, year 4, we might be three physical therapists deep in this one clinic. And to me, that's a very successful de novo. And don't get me wrong, we don't have all of our de novos don't do that well, but that is what we're shooting for every single time.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yep.
Great.
And then based on your $150,000 in cash, a lot of what we look at is what a lot of people can do is analyze cash on cash return. So cash on cash return, if you're a private practice owner, is if it cost me $150,000 in capital expense in order to open up this clinic, that includes working capital, that includes the construction to build out the clinic, that includes the equipment and all the clinical tools that you need in the clinic. That includes if you have any loss in the first couple months when you open up the clinic. And then over what period of time are you going to get to 100%? Are you going to get to 100% in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? And by getting to that, I mean the cash flow, the net income at the end after EBITDA. I mean, I talk in EBITDA, but free cash flow, how much flows to you after you pay everybody?
Awesome. So again, tapping into that unique perspective, you've been on both ends of not only selling your practice or merging your practice, but also buying other practices.
Sure.
I never had experience, and I've been through conversations around an external sale and then ended up selling internally as well. I never understood the value of a de novo clinic until I talked with you from a transactional component. I think that would be earth shattering for owners to hear about the importance of that. So if if I own two practices, two locations, and I'm thinking about opening a third, how does that enter into the conversation from the buyer's perspective, and how do they view it, and also the seller's perspective, me as the owner? What does that mean to me? What's the value for both of us if I'm thinking about doing that?
And just so you know, a lot of small practice owners or private practice owners that don't have that many clinics don't take advantage of this. So what it is if you can put a pro forma or projections together and give some basis or some, let's call it historical relevance to the fact that you know that you can achieve the numbers or the projections that you can achieve, you could get credit for that in transactional value today, or at least in an earnout, maybe an earnout in post-COVID times. But prior to COVID, you could get that transactional value, the multiple on that EBITDA of what you would get in 2 or 3 years, because you've projected it, you've shown a history of achieving that goal, and then you could get that value, transactional value, in advance at the time of your closing. A lot of times we're doing it in earnouts post-COVID, but pre-COVID, a lot of people were getting those values now, and who knows, after vaccine comes out and things get back to normal, that might all translate back into higher valuations for those private practice owners.
Okay, so let's do a real world example here.
Sure.
And I'm not negotiating a sale
Gotcha.
or merger of my business.
No worries.
But I just want to put some real numbers. So in 2018, and again, you called out the nugget. Most owners never think about this or take advantage of it.
Exactly.
And I think it's very relevant for the owners that are on this call. So,
I would also say most owners don't put it on paper in order for them to take advantage of it. Even when they're opening up a clinic, you got to put it on paper in order to kind of project it in the first place.
yeah. So you used a very important term that several other of our guests here today have used, and that's pro forma. Just to reset for everybody, a pro forma is a financial projection into the future. So for example, when we opened our Dolphin Clinic in September of 2018, Dan, our clinical director and partner there, did a 1-year projection for every month. This is our expected revenue and these are expected costs. To answer your question, Ron, that clinic was started turning a profit within 60 days, which is kind of crazy. And in year one, first full year in business, 2019, they did $212,000 in EBITDA, which I thought was amazing. We were very happy with that. And then, Dave, I think your target is around 300K, 350K, something like that.
Depending on the state we're in, but let's call it just under that, maybe 250, 300.
Yeah. So, and our goal, was to hit the same ballpark within 24 months to 36 months. So now, since that point, we've opened clinic. We had 2 COVID clinics that we opened literally right before the pandemic hit, and luckily they're on a nice trajectory as well, right around 140, 150 visits per week already. And then we're opening a 6th location. So what I would do, if I hear you correctly, is I would take a projection of EBITDA, a future projection of EBITDA, and start that conversation and try to recognize at least a portion of that value within the overall value of my practice. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah. So you're projecting out the visits, you're projecting out the referrals, you're projecting out the cost, you're projecting out the revenue, and then minus the cost, you'll get to EBITDA eventually. And then if you can kind of show that on paper to your potential buyer, and it looks good, presents well, and you have some kind of rationale or some historical kind of performance to kind of back up your claim, then you can get that value, and the buyer will kind of recognize that. in some capacity, in some way, shape, or form. Absolutely.
Okay. So I would feel remiss if I didn't ask you about this. We've all been through this crazy year, right? Deal flow has been a little goofy. I know you've had you've acquired some new partners or merged with some new partners recently. Can you just give us some color in terms of deal flow that you're seeing in the marketplace right now?
Sure. So, a lot of the, let's say, buyers, people like us and other people that were that grow through acquisition, we're all kind of talking and all trying to kind of let things happen. Some things were like on the table, let's say going into COVID. Some things were kind of just like, COVID gave us a lot of time to kind of put those discussions together, talk to more people, see what else was out there, kind of create more relationships. And now is like, just at this turn of the year, I have like, LOI is a term that I use a lot, letter of intent. So letter of intent for us means that we've agreed to terms, both the buyer and the seller have agreed to terms, and then we're trying to close. So I have like 6 people going into LOI in the next 2-3 weeks. So like now the deal flow is starting to happen. We had a couple close just recently over the last couple weeks, last couple months. And then now going into the new year, I feel like a lot of that kind of work that was happening during COVID or post-COVID, whatever you want to call it, is going to come to fruition in this quarter going into Q2.
Great. It was a very detailed answer, and I appreciate that you just to let owners know that they're really happening, because I know we had some owners going into the COVID that had deals in place and then they kind of backed off. Just letting them know that they can at least dip their toe in the water again moving forward. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Anything specifically that when you're acquiring a clinic, what is the most valuable thing? Let's say secondary to EBITDA, because we're in a visits business, we're in an EBITDA type business. Understanding that, and Bob just crushed that in the last session. Bob Kowalik, what other things do you look for when you're acquiring a partner?
To me, the most valuable thing is if you could drive referrals. Those visits don't come, that revenue and those EBITDA doesn't come unless the patient comes in your door in the first place. So if you can drive referrals into your clinic and have a plan or create relationships, and you could kind of, whether it be through physicians or through health systems or through community relations, or have a plan or a system or something along those lines, where not only can we can trust the fact that those referrals are going to keep coming in, but then also have some kind of system that can kind of bring into the fold, and we can kind of integrate with our plan to kind of even drive in more referrals. Because usually when we're acquiring clinics, it kind of comes into a sub-market. So maybe if, for example, I'm acquiring your practice in Pennsylvania, but I have practices near you in Pennsylvania, I can kind of develop those referral relationships together. And, now it kind of even becomes even more valuable to the whole. The team is always bigger than the individual. So that to me is always valuable, and how consistent and how let's say how much I can trust that those are going to keep happening, and the trend around that. So bringing in new business is to me the most valuable thing.
Wonderful. I want to catch up here in the chat and Q&A. By the way, if you have a question for Dave, type that in the Q&A and I'll moderate. Jesse asked, what was the nature of the event that we held at the library? It was a workshop. I don't remember the diagnosis, but it was either, off the top of my head, I know Jan and Joe did the workshop for us. They're 2 of our directors, and yeah, it was either rotator cuff or back pain at the public library, and they promoted it for free. It was kind of crazy, and worked out really well. Ron asked the question, how long do you expect to start turning a profit on the de novo? I know you kind of alluded to that. Is there like a month goal that you have?
Yeah, ideally we're looking at 3 months in order to become EBITDA positive.
Yeah, so that's income or revenue minus cost are positive, right?
Yep, exactly.
Wonderful. And then same for an acquisition. So how do you view an acquisition in terms of EBITDA positive?
Well, usually we're buying practices or acquiring practices that are already EBITDA positive. So it's a little bit different of a kind of analysis at that point in time. So the analysis on, you can still analyze kind of cash on cash return. And if you're going to return on that cash, like, so the total capital outlay or the internal rate of return or the net present value. But in our scenario, we're looking at acquisitions as a valuation add. So how much EBITDA can we add? So we're already acquiring a business EBITDA positive. So we're kind of taking that EBITDA, adding it to our EBITDA, and then we generate what that's going to return for us in a potential next sale. But so a little bit different analysis versus de novo and acquisition.
Got it. Hopefully that helps, Ron. And then Pratik, do I have a pro forma template? Yes. I bet you Dave's is nicer though.
In my defense, I got a lot of people that can help me do that. We have all different types of templates too.
I have a very simplified one with like a single line item for income, and then I think we divide our cost into 10 categories. But Pratik, you should actually have access to that through GrowthX. We can make sure you get that. Great.
As long as it shows the projection, it doesn't matter what it looks like.
Yes. And the other thing that I want to just share with everybody, that Dave, I'm not even sure you're aware of this. So I was talking with a lot of owners last year. The attempt or the goal was to do 3 owner interviews a week, just in terms of how we were navigating, how the industry was navigating the pandemic and getting back to normal. I had used the terms pro forma for like 17 years, but it was kind of goofy that I had been saying that. And also the de novo, like when you started talking about that, there were some key phraseology, EBITDA driver, I remember as well. There was key phraseology that you had used that I really had only seen in a few other places before, but kind of had made it into my vocabulary, but weren't sticky. And really what I came to realize is that, you know, with a private practice owner journey and projection, our drivers and our vocabulary changes a little bit. Is that fair?
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Not to put you on the spot, you've had, you know, a very, you've ascended rapidly in your career. Can you talk, and you and I talked about this specifically, and by the way, I literally, when I was talking with Chris, I said the word boogeyman. Like, you know, for most of us that are small practice owners, we have, you know, 1 to 3 locations, something like that. Anybody that is in corporate PT is kind of like the enemy, competitor, and that, you know, you're very down to earth. Chris is very down to earth, very approachable. You're here sharing with hundreds of other owners, like not hiding anything.
Sure.
Can you just shed some light on that in terms of the humanity of corporate PT, and that it's not completely bad? There's something we can learn there in our journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I had the same perspective, you know, when, you know, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I had the same perspective. What is corporate PT in my world? It was at the time before private equity came into New Jersey market or New York market. It was Kessler and Select Medical at the time was the corporate world of PT, or what I defined as it when I was a private practice owner. And I kind of always had this kind of negative connotation to what that actually means. And now kind of being a part of that, being like, you know, talking the new language, using these terms, these financial terms and stuff like that, I recognize that we're still all the same people with a lot of the same goals. We're not trying to like take advantage of people or hurt people or anything like that. We're just trying to, we have our own way of like, what we feel is right. A lot of times it's kind of more data driven, like, you know, kind of because there's a lot of risk involved when there's a little bit more money involved, and because there's a lot of kind of, let's say, processes and procedures when you communicate with a lot of different people. But for me, I thought it was this big boogeyman, but you know, I just learned through the process over the last 4 or 5 years, hindsight is 2020, but there's a lot to learn when you can kind of partner and interact with so many other different people that are very similar to yourself. Because if you grow through acquisitions, you know, there's a private practice owner that was doing what I was doing in Long Island and in Connecticut and Massachusetts. And now I could kind of work with them and we interact together, and it's not the boogeyman that I thought it was.
Yeah, very fair. We had a question come in here from Pradeep, and thanks for shedding some light on that, Dave.
Sure.
So from Pradeep, can you throw some light on reimbursement contracts and M&A? Are you able to drive better payer contracts with your new strength in numbers? What is the threshold where you are big enough to negotiate with a payer?
Yes, that exists. If there's a lot of strength with having a certain number of, let's call it market share with a payer. There's many different payers that could depend on state. In New Jersey, that's a big thing. Like the contracts, the commercial contracts in New Jersey and in New York and New Jersey has, you know, just kind of have popular, you know, people know that a lot of the commercial contracts in New York and New Jersey are not the greatest because there's so much density. But there is ways of kind of getting market share and getting better relations with the payers. I would say that in the future, we're going toward a value-based care model. It's already hit the orthopedic world. It's already hit the health systems world. Everybody that we do business on a larger level, they're inside of ACOs and episodes of care and bundle payments. So yes, there's ways that we can kind of develop relationships with payers. My suggestion is to find out how to objectify your outcomes so that you can demonstrate to the payer that you're you can reduce the cost on the healthcare system, not increase the cost on the healthcare dynamic. So even if you get paid more per visit, or if you're getting a better relationship with that payer, why? Is that because you're reducing the cost on the other part of the healthcare dynamic? You're reducing the need to go to medications or drugs, or you're reducing the need to go to spine surgery. You're reducing the need to go to other people within the healthcare system because essentially physical therapy is a solution to all this as an industry. We improve people's function. That's what we're here to do. So I think that over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to find physical therapy has a strong place in that value-based care market. And I think that's where our payer relations are going to improve.
Great. Your partner, Owen, I believe, I forget the exact title. Is it Clinical Excellence?
Yeah, so we have our Clinical Excellence department, and he is the Director of Outcomes that's in our Clinical Excellence, and he's also the Regional Director of Clinical Excellence for a certain area, but he's in charge of that. That's what, you know, so he's in charge of putting together our outcomes data and then presenting that data to our payers and other people that might need it.
Yeah. So for most of us, we don't have a Clinical Excellence department. Where can we start thinking about data? Is it something as simple as like a functional score that we're tracking consistently? Is it, where do we start to head that off at the pass?
There's softwares for it now. We use Photo, or Keat is a big one. So there's different softwares out there that you can kind of track your outcomes that way that make it a lot easier. But tracking your outcomes, let's say, as far as how well your patient is improving, track to let's say the national average, how many visits per referral, how much cost that is. So essentially in physical therapy, we can say our outcomes do have an impact on the patient's function, which is a little bit different than other types of healthcare. But in healthcare, it's about cost. So outcomes kind of is consistent with cost in their language. But if we are providing a certain amount of care, how much can that cost reduce? It's challenging. We're not there yet. We're not there as an industry yet to kind of prove it in many instances. But at a larger scale, we're trying to do that. At least we are internally. We're trying to figure out how to do that. And we do have some historic relations where we're developing that process. So starting with just getting a software and tracking it.
Yeah. to me, that almost seems like cheating because I can remember, ties back to Cincinnati sports medicine in the 90s with George Davies and Kevin Wilk doing all these ridiculous spreadsheets for, and that's exactly what they were doing. They were taking that data and turning around and going to the insurance companies to justify better reimbursement. Stacy asked, did you have to sell off any locations due to COVID? Were you able to keep all operating?
Yeah, we have about 20. So many of you that, I don't know where everybody is geographically speaking, but many of you might know that Manhattan was hit pretty hard during the COVID time. So Manhattan is not nearly back to what it's been at all as a, the amount of people that are inside of Manhattan on a daily basis. So we have about 20, 25 offices inside of Manhattan. So that's where our offices that we had to kind of close. We didn't sell any offices, but we had to close a couple offices, at least during that time. Just recently, like this week, when the vaccines started coming out, is when we started hitting a climb back in our Manhattan offices. But many of the offices, whoever has a practice in Manhattan kind of knows what I'm talking about. But New York City was hit pretty hard. So that's where we were really the only place that was kind of hit to that dramatic, where we had to close facilities. In the suburbs and everywhere else, we are kind of open, ready, and operating normally.
Makes sense, Dave. Jonathan, your question, you're going to have to go back and watch the recording. Dave answered that a little bit ago in case you missed it. But other than that, Dave, do you have this book?
I don't. I saw the other thing. I've read Jim Collins before, but I'm interested in reading that. Thank you.
Hardcover, Kindle, Audible. What's your
I actually
preferred
usually use Audible, but if there's a technology,
we'll send you Audible.
All right, thanks.
Other than that, for everybody that's on here, make sure you show Dave some love in the chat. Dave, for your first time, I think you did awesome.
Thanks, man.
It was very, very good. Really appreciate the knowledge and you sharing here and what you're doing in private practice PT. Thanks, Dave.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the time. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. So we have one more partner presentation from Hands-On Companies, and then we're going to be giving away an espresso before Kathy and Carl join us here on stage. So without further ado, I'm going to let Hods take it away.
Hi, I'm Dr. Dimitrios Christopoulos, co-founder of Hands-On Diagnostics. This breakthrough Chad Madden event takes place at a very uncertain time for the physical therapy profession. Just remember that when Medicare cuts were initially announced, they were supposed to be at a rate of 8%. Then that changed to 9%. Finally, after all the advocacy that took place from our profession and many of you, it got down to approximately 3.6%, and we are not 100% certain if there will be an additional 2% cuts unless Congress acts until March 31st, 2021. So much uncertainty taking place with all this, to the point that the president of the American Physical Therapy Association called these reductions unsustainable for physical therapy, and especially for private practice physical therapy. So what do we do about this? The entire profession has been worried about what's going on with these Medicare cuts and the uncertainty, and especially private practice owners have been very uneasy about this whole situation. And we know very well that this doesn't stop. We have also 15% cuts coming up if the physical therapy services are being provided by a PTA. And these Medicare cuts can actually affect the general reimbursement for physical therapy, because most insurance rates determine their customary and reasonable rates based on an average of Medicare and the regional workers' compensation fee schedule. So many of you, many of the private practice owners have been on edge on this and have been worrying about the uncertainty that these cuts and future cuts are bringing to the physical therapy profession. But not all physical therapists have been worrying. For example, the members of our HADS team, the members of our HADS network, they have not been worrying at all. And the reason for that is that because of what they do in their practices, because of what Janine and Nathan and Christina and Bart and Angie and Bill and Joe are among many others are putting into their practices right now, they see significant increases, anywhere between 25 to 50% increases in their per visit reimbursement. And I'll tell you how they do that. But, well, let me also say that current data indicates that reimbursement rates for physical therapy will be going down at least until 2022, and who knows what happens after that. So this forces physical therapists to be in very slim profit margins of 10% or less, especially after this upcoming Medicare cut. I'm estimating that profit margins across the country for physical therapists will be slashed to about 8% average. So what do? Yeah, we do advocate. It's very important to advocate, but we find solutions right here, right now. So what these solutions might be? Well, this is what we are bringing in front of you, in front of the physical therapy private practice profession. The HADS, the hands-on diagnostics revolutionary or evolutionary approach. Well, the problem is that physical therapy has a very limited universe of CPT codes. No matter what type of therapeutic exercise you do, or no matter what manual therapy you do, you are billing the same codes. But we are bringing to you now a new universe of CPT codes that are paid to you, to the physical therapist in private practice, by the major carriers, including Medicare. So how do we do that? Well, look, the current model of physical therapy is the regular model: PT evaluation, treatment plan, treatment intervention, and so on and so forth until you end care of the patient. We are introducing a new paradigm for physical therapy where diagnostic testing, such as electromyography, nerve conduction studies, musculoskeletal ultrasound, and others are being introduced to what you bring in to your patients. Now, these diagnostic studies, they don't only have a huge financial benefit, but they have a tremendous clinical benefit. As you can see, because these objective tests have tremendous degrees of sensitivity and specificity, you can identify the root cause of the patient's problem with greater accuracy compared to just the physical examination that you do on a patient. This has led to have about 62% better outcomes with change in the patient management in a study that we published in January of 2020 over a group of more than 465 patients. More and more physical therapists learn about these approaches and they get involved with hands-on diagnostics. We are now in 26 different states and we are helping many therapists to become board certified in these technologies and really reap all the benefits of what diagnostics have to offer to their private practices. So how do they do that? Why these rates are so high? How are they able to earn so much within the first 12 months that they are involved in the program? So here is why. The national average of 1 hour of physical therapy treatment is $97. I know many of you say, oh, it's much less for me. Yeah, but if we take national average, is about $97 for 1 hour of PT pre-Medicare time, pre-Medicare CATS time, okay? $97. Well, the same 1 hour, if you provided an EMG test and a neuro ultrasound on a patient, you would get for this combo a national average of $700. And this is how the reimbursement of these diagnostic tests is anywhere between 3 to 10 times higher than a single visit of physical therapy. So this is how these practices are able to earn so much because they incorporate these technologies. I would love to talk to you about how you can implement these technologies in your practice. You can go to callwithdimi.com and I'll be very happy to meet with you and to determine together whether hands-on diagnostics is appropriate for your practice right now. So go to callwithdimi.com, book a quick meeting with me, and I'll be very happy to analyze your practice and discuss with you all of the possibilities and options you have to get involved in the area of diagnostics. There are many ways that you can get involved in this area, so I can explain to you exactly how. Make sure that you book at least a half-hour meeting with me so that we can have ample time for me to be able to explain to you the possibilities. Thank you very much, and I will leave you with a little video about this. Thank you.
Because you're a physical therapist, you're not afraid to face pain. Where many see obstacles, you see opportunities. Because you're a physical therapist, you're always looking for solutions to your patient's pain, dysfunction, or disability. Looking at the surface of a problem will never be good enough for you. You're poised to tackle your patient's problems using every molecule of your body and every modern tool available to heal. Because you're a physical therapist, you're a scientist and a pioneer. You are willing to step beyond the crowd and lead the way. You dare to dream the future of the profession. A future where advanced diagnostic technologies of ultrasound imaging and electromyography are at your fingertips. Hands-on diagnostics helps you see your patient's pain. Together, we can create your future of physical therapy now. It's time for diagnostics in physical therapy. Seeing is believing. Join the movement now.
Awesome. That was Dimi from Hands On Diagnostics. If you want them to reach out to you, go ahead and let us know in the poll. And we are about to give away an espresso. All right. Again, you have to be on to attend, so hopefully no one just hopped off. Wheel of Fortune. Donnie. Yay! Donnie is on. Oh, and fast with that hand raise. I love it. Perfect, Donnie. We will be in touch after the summit to get you your Nespresso. So fun. All right, Chad, Carl, Kathy.
Wheel is
And
the
then-
greatest thing ever.
Just a reminder, this is the last session before we give away a MacBook Air. So now is not the time to leave, my friends. Oh, Carl can't turn on this video. Now, can you? There we go.